All right, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. This is one of our home team episodes where we jump on, we talk about all things fitness, and we're ready to dive right in. Gabe's been hosting this last couple of weeks, been doing an awesome job. I'm kicking this one off with this simple question of, what's worse, a 2-minute, a 1-minute, or a 30-second interval, especially on the row or on the bike? I did that this morning. It was part of our Train Hard Daily that's coming up, and I have my own opinion. So I'm going to open it up to the group, start here, and then we're going to dive into something I'm very, very interested in hearing the team's feedback on, especially Gabe's, which is, do you need as much rest time as programmed in our flex track to get the intended stimulus? But let's start off with the worst interval. 2 minutes, 1 minute, or 30 seconds. I used the rower today. Who's going?
I'd say by default, the longer one is the worst. Just as a general rule of thumb for me anyway. I think it depends on the person, the intention, obviously how hard you go, the rest intervals the rest periods between intervals. But yeah, the longer you stretch it out, for me, the worse it is, period.
Well, in any of these intervals, you're looking for the highest level of sustainable intensity, right? Within the time period. So for 30 seconds, I think you could just go and you can kind of outrun the pain. I think in 1 minute, you can probably go and outrun the pain, and it will probably hit you a little bit after. But I think in the 2-minute time frame, I don't think anything gets much nastier than trying to hold on to almost a 30-second pace for 2 minutes. And that would be the goal there, right? You'd be trying to hold as close to that maximum sustainable intensity for that time period. Gabe, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 2 minutes is that that like sweet spot, super difficult. Because I would even say that 2 minutes is tougher than anything longer than that. Because I think once you get into like the 3-minute, 5-minute, you're settling into some sort of pace. So even beyond the examples that you had, I think 2 minutes is just it's long enough that you're suffering for a while, but short enough that you shouldn't start like thinking about pacing it. You got to start pretty hard. So 2 minutes is nasty, man. But on the flip side of that, Dennis, I know we used to do this in the programming. You program 20-second assault bike intervals with, 2 minutes and 40 seconds rest, 3 minutes rest. And, this will go into what we'll talk about later, like a nice long rest period. You do that for 10 sets. And if you do that right, and that's the big if you hit those right, if you're actually RP10ing, you're not thinking about, I'm trying to keep the same calorie output for all 10. You're treating each one like it's your last. I mean, it doesn't get any nastier than that. And it's a long rest and only 20 seconds. So that's kind of the flip side of it. But that's when you're doing like purely just anaerobic work.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're talking about this as 2 minutes. So this morning, my rounds were 51 cals, 50 cals, 50 cals, 25, 23, 23, 23, 14, 11, 11, 11, 11. So it's interesting because I was doing 2 minutes at 50 cals each one. And then if you divide that in two, it's at 23. I was 25 cals, 23 cals. So like, it's almost like you're holding the same pace, more or less. And then when you divided that into 30 seconds, I was doing 11. So I actually dropped off, but the rest was also decreased. So the rest went from 2 minute to the 30-second rest is not a long time. So that's why I think you saw that. But to your guys' point, like that 2 minutes is probably the crappiest one. I'd say the 2 minutes was the worst one today.
Well, even in this example, right? You mentally, you have other stuff coming down the line, right? So if you were just going to do it one of these intervals in a vacuum, like you just had to do one, and you're gearing up to do either 1 30-second, 1 90-second, 1 minute, 2 minute, whatever. I think the all-out effort for, like Dennis said, the longest one that you can hold without quote unquote pacing is going to be the shittiest one for sure.
Yeah.
I think too, as the intervals get shorter, the shittiness of them won't really be felt during the interval itself, but either during the rest period or after you're done. Like that's the case with the 20-second on, 240 off on the assault bike. The 20 seconds, I mean, it gets pretty sucky the last like 5 seconds of that. But the worst part of it by far is the time between intervals, and then for like the remaining 30 minutes when you're done, how awful you feel. And that wouldn't be the case with longer intervals. The longer interval, the shittiest part is the interval itself.
Hey,
so true.
Dennis, did I miss your strongman competition?
I missed my strongman competition. Yeah.
because you were out sick.
I was out, dude. Yep. I missed it.
Oh man. Dude, what is going on here between Gabe's like sciatica that turned into this and then missing his marathon and now you missing the strongman competition?
I know. Psychosomatic, man.
It's the curse of the podcast.
I know. Yeah. No, I'm going to find another.
Dude, I'm sorry. You're going to do another one though. You're going to sign up for another one.
I'm going to find another one. Yeah, I haven't found one yet, but it'll be several months down the road. But I'm going to try to find another one to sign up for.
Okay. All right.
It was fun training for it.
It was. I imagine, dude. Like I was thinking of you because that log and like those awkward objects. I was thinking about this morning, and so I'm glad I got that clarity. All right.
Nice.
Well, you didn't win it. That's okay. You
didn't win.
Yeah, you're still alive. You didn't. Yeah, it's all good.
DNF.
Okay. Hey, just so look, I was talking to one of the guys, the men's club, a couple days ago, and we were grabbing coffee, and he's like, "Yeah, dude, I like the Flex program that you have on the app, but I reduced the rest. Is that okay?" And I said, "Well, why do you reduce the rest?" And he's like, "I got to get to work." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Do you still like? Are you feeling good?" Blah blah. And he's like, "Yeah." So then I said, "Yeah, man, I reduced the rest quite a bit too." Just because I'm trying to get through the work and then get on with other stuff I have to do. But I wanted to start that conversation because I think for quite a few people, when they look at programming, whether it's our Train Hard Daily or Flex, there's quite a bit of rest in some cases for an intended goal. Is it necessary if you're on a time crunch? If you're not even on a time crunch, but you just like, dude, it's just too much rest and you just want to let it go. What's your take?
Yeah. I mean, as the author of the program, there's a lot of layers to that question that you can address. The first one, honestly, is like, how time crunched are you really, honestly? Because if you, and I would assume this is the case for you, Jay, and for anyone that says this, if I were to take how much you're actually resting and add the time that I'm prescribing as rest, you're maybe adding 10 minutes to the entire session, maybe. And that's being super generous and exaggerating. And if you're telling me you don't have an extra 10 minutes to get a really quality session and hit it, I'm calling bullshit 10 times out of 10. So that's kind of like, let me preface all this with like everyone that like has shit to do and is rushing through the work. I think in many times it's an excuse to kind of like go through the motions and you're just kind of, you're going too light, you're getting to work. And having said that, I think that that's perfectly fine if that's like what you want out of the session that day. Like, I know that not everyone's going out there and like, dude, I am trying to get a 10 out of 10 session because I want to grow muscle and I want to like get like a really, really like, I want this session to build off of next session to build off the last one because I'm literally trying to put on lean muscle mass and be like, hey, that's my number one priority as much as it did for me. I know that's not the case for everyone. People want to go in there, get a pump, feel like they got a good workout and continue with their day. If you're doing that, I think that it's perfectly okay to just, go from one to the other, keep the weights moderate, feel a good pump, feel like you're working, feel good, and then go on with your day. Perfectly good. That being said, if you're really trying to see progress, and if anything, you've been like, man, I keep doing all these different programs and I'm just like hitting this plateau. Like I want to see change. You got to go heavier, man. Like I say it all the time, like people are not going heavy enough. And if you go heavy enough, the rest that are prescribed in there, man, like you should be looking at that clock and be like, man, I wish I had 30 more seconds because I am like kind of not ready to go here. So high level, that's how I would answer it. And what I'll add to that, Jay, and I was giving you a hard time about this. The video you sent me of you doing that pull workout, dude, you were doing bent over rows with 95 pounds. Like, dude, come on. Like you should be doing some bent over rows with like 155, 165. Like put some straps on. Come on. Like let's get a little bit of a stimulus there, big guy. Of course you're going to be like
dumbbells in each hand or 95-pound barbell.
No, 95 pounds on the barbell. He had the green plates on. And I'm like, dude, come on.
Okay, here we go.
Did he have the little incrementals on the sides? Like
what are we doing here? No, but I again, it all depends on your goal, right? Because Jay, for you, I know that you're trying to get in there, trying to feel good, feel like you did something. You got a lot going on in your day. You want to go beyond? Perfectly fine. For someone like me, and I know that for a lot of people out there that are strictly following this program because they want to see results, I would challenge you to go heavy enough so that the rest feels appropriate. That would kind of be like my high level on that. But at the end of the day, I think if you don't have 10 more minutes to give to your session, I'm calling bullshit on the fact that you're like that time crunched.
What's the physiological reason to have that type of rest period between sets in that type of program?
Well, I mean, to be completely honest, and Dennis, I'm really curious your take because you're like the encyclopedia on this stuff. To be completely honest, I think that for most people that want hypertrophy, like the ideal is maybe not even necessarily to superset. It's to like do like, this is the exercise I'm doing and rest as needed, like feel fully recovered every time you hit sets. Honestly, the reason that I prescribe rest is to like not let people dilly-dally. The reason the rest is prescribed isn't so much, hey, you need this much rest to make the most of it. It's like, hey, like I want you going in 2 minutes so that it doesn't become 3 minutes, doesn't become 4 minutes. But I think that in an ideal world for a hypertrophy program, you should always be doing the sets, like the next set, like rest is needed. You should feel like ready to go again to get the most of it.
Just real
Having
quick,
said that, most people don't have enough time to do that.
On that note, and then I want to hear what Dennis has to say on this. Like, you know, I know you're hating on my bent over row. I didn't want to make you look bad. So I had the 155 on, I dropped it down. But in all seriousness, a lot of the times in flex, it'll say like moderate, it'll be like 12 to 15 rep range, moderate, heavy. And I'm just trying to hit the intended stimulus from the author, right? So like not all the time is flex program. Oftentimes it's programmed as that moderate, heavy. So I'm curious, like, does that allow me to have less rest or are you still going to hit that same fatigue? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think some of that is, you know, just because it's the verbiage that we've always used in the program. So it's for consistency. The way that I write it is like, there are just some movements that aren't going to allow you to go heavy for whatever reason. But having said that, the RPE there is always an 8, a 9, or a 10, which should be, you know, if you want to put it in terms of like RIR, reps in reserve, like I would say between like 4, 3, or 2 reps in reserve. And this is where it gets interesting because for a lot of people, and they've done these studies, you know, like they go on and they're like, all right, you know, give me a 2 RIR set. So you're literally supposed to get to 2 reps short of like your max. And then after that, they tell them to go for a max set and they end up doing like 7, 8 more reps. It's a lot of like people just aren't actually getting to what an actual RPE 8, RPE 9, RPE 10 actually means. And I would always ask people to default to that. The moderate, heavy, that kind of loading is just like for people to think about, you know, for me, a dumbbell movement is going to be something that more lends itself to moderate weight, just because the actual pounds on it is moderate versus, you know, a barbell lift is always going to be more on the heavy side, if that makes sense. But it's more, you know, like the verbiage that we've always used and trying to keep it consistent. I think for a hypertrophy program specifically, speaking in terms of like RIR and RP is much more beneficial.
Dude, I love the RIR.
It's big in the hypertrophy world.
I love that.
It's like a mirror of RP.
I'm going to
it's
text
just
you, be like, bro, how many do I need in reserve for this one? All right.
Yeah, but the problem with that, like he said, most people grossly underestimate how many reps, are actually left in reserve. So you might think you can only do 2 more when in reality you could probably crank out like 5, 6, 7 more reps. So that's a tricky thing to rely on.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's like the rest that you need is dictated by the effort you put into the set. I mean, to put it as simply as possible. And it's going to be dictated by the intended outcome of the training. If you're trying to build strength, if you're trying to build muscle, if you're trying to build endurance and stamina. But if you're trying to build muscle specifically, which, you know, we can just kind of utilize that as the intended outcome of flex, these sets should be taken near failure. Effectively. So if you're taking a set to near failure, you're going to need an adequate amount of time to recover before you're ready physiologically, psychologically to put that same effort in and repeat that, depending upon if you're going to be performing the same exercise, same muscle groups, etc. So like physiologically, there are 3 factors that determine or that are going to play a role in hypertrophy: mechanical tension, muscle damage, metabolic stress. And you have to recover between sets in order to create the appropriate amount of mechanical tension in the muscle to drive hypertrophy. And if you're not recovering adequately between sets, you're just simply not going to be able to create that much tension on the next set, and you won't be able to elicit the same response. So it's all dictated by again, the outcome, but also the effort that you're putting into each set. If you feel like you do a set, 30 seconds later, you can do the same exact exercise and repeat the same effort, you're probably not working that hard on that given set.
So if you do a set, let's say like eight reps of bent over row, and you get to 8 reps and you literally can only have 2 reps in reserve, you've really kind of hit that maximum level of exertion on the 8th rep. You know you have the potential to get to that number. And if you short your rest and you come back and you can only do 3, you're kind of underperforming or understimulating that same muscle group, versus if you had adequate rest and you're able to come back and do that same repeated set at 8 reps again.
Yeah.
It's not because you're not strong enough. It's just because you didn't take the adequate amount of time to recover to hit that next set at the same intensity.
Yep. And there's so many factors that affect this. Your conditioning will affect it just psychologically. I mean, sometimes you're just ready to do a set, and sometimes you're not. And so that will impact your ability to perform on the next set. But from a pure physiological standpoint, yeah, like the ATP stores have to recover adequately to be able to create the same amount of tension and generate the same amount of force.
So flipping the switch on that, right? Let's just take the intended stimulus this morning on the rows or the bike intervals. And I didn't feel like I had adequate rest to hit the same stimulus, right? The same work to rest ratio was difficult for me to maintain numbers. So that the intention is different, right? So you, as the author of the Train Hard Daily, how does that equate to the difference between that and the flex?
Well, conditioning will sort of have different principles that are guiding it as far as insufficient recovery between working sets. And that's done intentionally, where you're trying to sustain a certain output and almost feel under recovered and still work to sustain that. So it's not, but again, that'll vary depending upon the intended output. If you're trying to just give everything you possibly have to an interval and then recover fully, you can do that as well. But with conditioning work, generally, you're going to look for more like sustainable efforts while feeling slightly under recovered to improve conditioning and muscular stamina and things like that. So they're 2 slightly different conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. It depends on what you're training for. But keep going. I mean, CrossFit, I think especially completely flipped the whole paradigm of recovery between sets on its head. Cause all the research, all the, the whole belief system was built around this idea that you had to recover at least 3 to 5 minutes between, and when we're talking about developing pure maximal strength, you really had to recover 3 to 5 minutes for your ATP stores to fully replenish, before you could put a subsequent maximal effort in after a set. And I mean, you've seen anecdotally case after case after case after case that people defying that over and over again. And I think that was just because the incredible capacity and level of conditioning that CrossFit athletes had, where they never, you never really saw people that had the levels of strength that CrossFit athletes had combined with the level of conditioning. So they kind of I think, even though the research probably hasn't caught up with it yet, they seem to defy what was physically capable of doing. And I think, in general, you see a lot of that nowadays because people have just higher levels of strength and conditioning perhaps than ever before.
Yeah. But that also comes down to the fact that the intention of CrossFit is to increase capacity, right? Increase output. And that takes into account across many of the CrossFit style workouts that you're going to have reduced rest to get the amount of output, maximal amount of output, as opposed to resting long periods of time and having less output in that period of time, right? So in a 10-minute AMRAP of, power cleans and burpees, if the goal was to just get one set of max reps for both, you would approach it very differently versus if you're going after 10 minutes, how long can you sustain this back and forth with the barbell. And you're necessarily across that 10 minutes going to see reduced output versus when you first started the workout. But at the end of the 10 minutes, you've accumulated far more repetitions than you would have if you just did one max set, right? Like the goal of CrossFit is very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Have you guys seen, speaking of CrossFit, this isn't necessarily the exact same thing we're talking about, but did you see on Judd's podcast with the power athlete with with
the CrossFit football guy?
Oh, John Wellborn?
Yeah, I was like, dude, why am I blanking on his name? John Wellborn. Did you guys see this? And then Judd just like continues to like dig in on CrossFit because him and John Wellborn were on a podcast.
Who is Judd? I'm sorry, who is Judd? Judd?
Justin Leinhard, and he's a strength coach, formerly in the military, and so he had John Wellborn on the podcast, and they started basically talking about how John Wellborn and Greg Glassman had kind of fallen out over some stuff. I just was curious if you guys had seen that because I got a message from Gabe. You'll get a kick out of this. I got a message. I'm just looking it up from Hiller, and Hiller says to me, Andrew Hiller, he says, "Hey man, would you have any interest in getting in on the John Wellborn power athlete versus CrossFit BJJ match?" And I'm like, dude, I don't know what that is. So I'm finding out what it is, but I was just curious if you guys had seen that.
No, I haven't seen that. But I recently went to the local LA Fitness over here with Mike Giordana, Mike G, from formerly of CrossFit. Yeah. First of all, Mike G is still in incredible shape, super, super strong. But we got into a discussion while we were there, and he's one of the smartest guys that I know. We were talking about just the inarguable impact that CrossFit has had on the fitness landscape. And there's a lot of people out there that hate on CrossFit, and I understand some of the opinions and some of the point of views about hating on it. But if you go to the gym, if you go to LA Fitness, if you go to Equinox, if you look around, just look around, you're going to see Rogue fitness equipment. You're going to see Concept 2 rowers. You're going to see barbell areas with many, many Rogue Olympic lifting barbells, platforms, more platforms than you've ever seen in the gym before. You're going to see more people doing weightlifting movements, more people using free weights than ever before. And if you look at the fashion, you can see the fashion influence that it's had mostly on the female side of the equation when you see people walking around in a lot of the things that the CrossFit women popularized way back in the day. It's inarguable that CrossFit had a massive, massive impact on the entire fitness industry and allowed a lot of other disciplines, including bodybuilding, strength and conditioning, Olympic lifting, powerlifting,
gymnastics,
rowing, gymnastics, all these things to thrive, all these things to really catch fire and thrive. And I think that that's one of the things that, CrossFit does get a lot of hate for, maximum intensity and kipping. And, a lot of people think on the injury side of the equation as well. But a lot of people in that camp don't recognize just the massive impact that it had on what you look at today and what you see. And, we saw this young lady pushing a Rogue sled down turf, and that would have never happened, 10 years ago. Never. So it's really cool to see.
It's undeniable for sure. And it's impacted all of us, even if now the training we do isn't like what it was back in the day, or wouldn't be something that you would find as like the programming in a CrossFit gym or whatever. But I mean, it'd be ridiculous to say that it hasn't gotten us to the point we are now, taught us so much about training, what intensity is, all of that good stuff. Aside from like the methodology, just like as an athlete, how much I've taken away as it, even if I'm not training that way regularly now, I also know that a lot of the benefits that I have in the things that I'm currently trying to excel at, whether that's running or high rocks, like I owe a lot of that to the years that I did that very specific type of training. Even if, I feel like I don't know if graduated from it's the right word, but need something a little different now, or that's just not something, even just because it doesn't interest me as much anymore. So for sure, completely agree. Taking a quick step back, just to give you guys the insights, because I was following this too. I was trying to look up the exact quote, but essentially the controversy was saying that the biggest lie Greg Glassman sold to the world was that work capacity was athleticism, was kind of the gist of like the controversy that was going out there. And then the clip that I saw, I didn't listen to the whole podcast, was them talking about there's a lot of this criticism that every movement in a CrossFit gym is in one dimension. It's like none of it is lateral movement, and how much of that translates to quote unquote athleticism. So I mean, there's just so much nuance to all this stuff, but that essentially, as best I can summarize it, so you guys have a little bit of context, was what was being thrown around and discussed. And, Dennis is nodding his head. It's something that you've heard in the past, but I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where it's like majoring in the minors a little bit for me. It's like, just pointing out the fact that hey, you're not moving laterally at all, and therefore it's an incomplete program. I completely get it, but I think that the benefit it had for so many people that weren't moving at all, before, and found a way to move and move consistently, to me is something that, to your point, MDB, some of these people that have these critiques don't recognize that. They're so focused on, well, it's missing this thing. It's like, yeah, I mean, I would agree, but is that thing the most important thing, or is it just getting people off the couch?
Dude, think about it. The LA Fitness, right? Their gyms have changed because of CrossFit. Literally the footprint of their gyms have changed because of CrossFit. They now have functional training spaces in the middle of the gym. That's because of CrossFit. You go to a hotel gym, you see kettlebells. That's because of CrossFit. Period. Mm-hmm. Olympic lifting has had a resurgence that I don't know if it had ever had, right? Because of CrossFit, I'd say. I don't know if you can make the exact same parallel to gymnastics, but I do think there's probably quite a few more people entering that sport because they're becoming aware of it through CrossFit. But in particular, Olympic weightlifting has skyrocketed. And so, yeah, anyways, there was a little bit of controversy. I'm going to go listen to the podcast. I was just watching the clips, and then I had no idea about this jiu-jitsu competition they want to do, which I think is that's just so outside the scope of the conversation. You're going to take a CrossFit athlete that does jiu-jitsu versus a power athlete that does jiu-jitsu, and it doesn't make that's I don't know. I don't get that. So I got to find out more.
Coming back to what Gabe said about lateral movement and athleticism, I do think it's a valid criticism of the CrossFit program. You don't see a lot of athletic, lateral, explosive movement in that program. And I think if you took somebody who had a strength and conditioning base and also was highly active in sport, somebody who was actively playing a sport, you would probably see that person fare really well on tests of athleticism versus somebody who's just a pure CrossFitter. But if you took somebody who was a pure CrossFitter and you took somebody off the street and you said, hey, go after these tests of athleticism, I think that the CrossFitter probably has a really good shot in that case. But I do think that there's a missing element to that CrossFit style programming of dynamic lateral movement. It's just hard. It's hard to do in the confines of the space that CrossFit happens in with people in class environments. And I think that if you were going to leave something out, not only because of space constraints, but because of probably risk of injury, right? Because as you start to bridge the gap more into athleticism and sport is where a lot of injury actually happens, in that kind of unfettered, unregulated environment where you're dynamically moving and have a lot of other factors that you see a lot of injury. And I think that if you're going to leave something out of the program, you can train that outside of the CrossFit gym. If you wanted to, that dynamic lateral movement, you could add that in, but I don't think it's necessary to complete the methodology and achieve the goals of what the methodology sets out to do, if that makes sense.
There you go.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
Yeah, I think in terms of developing athleticism, it depends. It's all relative to who we're talking about. It's certainly going to make someone, the average person, more athletic than they were if they were following, let's just say, a traditional exercise routine of machines and cardio circuits and stuff like that. I mean, just because you're going to be performing relatively more athletic movements than you otherwise would. So I think it exposed a lot of people to much more athletic style training than more traditional routines would have. But I think it's a tough argument to make that you could take a pretty high level athlete and start to train them with CrossFit style workouts and make them more athletic or a better athlete, unless there was a huge gap in their strength and conditioning program. And they had these glaring deficiencies in just their general physical fitness that style of training otherwise fulfilled. It's unlikely that you can make the argument that CrossFit training is going to produce better football players or better soccer players or than otherwise just more traditional strength and conditioning programs that follow really solid principles that expose them to the things that they need to be exposed to. And I think the proof is in the pudding. Like there's been examples of people over the years, like high level athletes that were following CrossFit workouts as a big part of their strength and conditioning, but not that many. And like really, and especially nowadays, like you'd be hard pressed to find any. And I don't think that that's a coincidence. I think that that's if CrossFit made you a better football player, you'd see all the professional athletes following CrossFit style training, but that's just not the case. And so I think that ultimately the proof is in the pudding with respect to like, are we seeing high level athletes follow this style of training? I would say generally no. There's some exceptions out there, and I think that kind of speaks to the effectiveness of it with respect to that.
But do you think it has to do with the complexity, Dennis? Like, when you talk about like high level athletes not doing CrossFit, do you think it's because they're spending so much time developing their skills as a football player or whatever that they don't have a desire, a need, or frankly, like to do? So are we like talking about two different things? When you think about CrossFit, like we're talking about it from like a mixed modality perspective and a complexity perspective with Olympic lifting and a little bit more complex gymnastics. That's what we're not seeing. You're still seeing the principles of like, I still think you're probably seeing some Metcons, some EMOMs, some AMRAPs, some stuff like that in the strength and conditioning program, but you're not seeing the complexity. Is that where you think there's the gap?
For sure. I think the resources required to develop certain skills that you can utilize effectively and safely in a intense environment is just not, like the risk reward is just not there. The amount of resources that have to be dedicated to learning those skills is not there for higher level athletes that have a whole nother, list of skills that they need to stay sharp at. And I think the application of it is it's just difficult, like especially when you're dealing with like mixed modality and a lot of variety, it's just hard to keep tabs on like what's an appropriate way to progress people through these types of workouts and this style of training outside of just looking at, again, pure work capacity, which to an extent will make a better athlete. But at a certain point, there's just a point of diminishing returns where you just don't have to improve your work capacity that much within mixed modality type of training.
Well, you made a really strong point that, like, aside from seeing glaring weaknesses in somebody's strength and conditioning program, right? What's the goal of CrossFit? The goal of CrossFit is to produce a really well-rounded athlete that at a moment's notice, you could pull something out of the hopper and that person could fare reasonably well at, right? You're looking at somebody who has really broad capacity across broad times and modal domains. When you're talking about these very high level athletes, man, these guys need very specialized skills. They need very specialized training. They need to do a very specific thing and they need to fucking perform on game day. Mm-hmm. And even Dennis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, even back to some of Greg's early articles, I think he talked about professional training professional athletes in CrossFit. And it was not an in-season thing ever. Mm-hmm. In-season was like not the time to do this stuff. If you were going to do it with professional athletes, it was out of season to develop the spear, the length of the spear, not the tip of the spear. Mm-hmm. But when these guys are getting down to brass tacks, man, they're multi-million-dollar contracts. They got to go out there and perform. They're doing very specialized things that I think Dennis nailed it. It's just a very different application.
Yeah. Dennis, would you say our train hard daily would be like, that would be the expression that you would use for most athletes most of the time? Because for me, when I think about a program that I like to follow to develop my overall fitness to help me then go do all the things that I want to do, I think about the train hard daily, right? Like I love what you're doing there, but what are your thoughts on that in particular? Or is there an area that you would push more if you're in that realm.
Yeah, no, I certainly it simplifies it down, right? Like you're not having to learn any real high level skills, so your resources aren't really being dedicated towards that. But it depends on the athlete and what they need to prepare for. To MDV's point, like sport is not unknown and unknowable. You know what you need to be prepared for, and your training needs to reflect that. So, in so much as athletes need to be strong and durable and have good conditioning. And have some muscle mass on them, then yeah, like I think our programs fit that bill for sure. But the more you know about what you need to prepare yourself for, the more specialized your training can become. Yeah.
Do you think it's worth prefacing the mention of Train Hard Daily for everyone listening that our Force program, we have a new app. We've mentioned this in the past, so nothing new here, but super excited. New app launching March 31st. And on that app, the Force program, the program everyone's been following and loving, will now be called Train Hard Daily. So just to kind of mitigate any confusion there.
Even I'm getting confused.
Train Hard Daily, Force. That's right.
The reason why I in particular really liked the idea of changing the name to Train Hard Daily is that I look at the Train Hard Daily as a really cool program that you could follow 6 days a week if you want, as just a baseline program that allows you to be fit and capable and hit these different cardio goals, strength goals, whatever, to allow you to then be like, all right, I'm going to go do this event. I'm going to go do a jiu-jitsu tournament. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to show up as a dad. I'm going to do this. Whereas if you want like specific, more like progressive overloading, hypertrophy training, dude, Flex is incredible. I absolutely awesome. It's just a Train Hard Daily is a daily program that helps you be ready. And so that's why I like the idea of calling it Train Hard Daily, because that's exactly what we're doing. We train hard every day. And this is the program that I generally follow along with Flex on occasion a couple times a week.
Yeah, the beauty of Train Hard Daily is that it's built to expose you to these different modalities across a training week. You're going to see aerobic conditioning, anaerobic conditioning, mixed modal conditioning, full body strength a couple times a week. And if we're talking about who that program is intended for, or like who's going to get the most bang for their buck, it's guys like us or guys out there who want to build muscle. They want to also be capable. They want to have a good level of conditioning. They want to look good with their shirt off. I think it checks all of those boxes in a program that allows somebody, you could train 6 days a week in it, or you could pick 3 or 4 days a week in that program and get a really well-rounded workout out of it. So it's not like, I have to do the 6 days to get the full impact of it. Yeah, 6 days is great. But if you have 4 days a week to do the Train Hard Daily and you pick a full body and aerobic conditioning and anaerobic conditioning and maybe, a mixed modal or another full body, you're going to get a fantastic outcome from that program.
Yeah. Yep. So
it won't make you a professional football player though, just to be clear.
it will not make you. Yeah. No. I
want to make outlandish claims.
Yeah. That makes sense. Awesome. Are we talking about Gabe? We didn't have a challenge from last week, right?
No, but Dennis has something in store for us. But we'll get that to that in the end. One thing I definitely wanted to touch on, because man, I'm a sucker for these videos. I know you jotted it down, Dennis. Is these? Have you guys seen these like exercise tier list videos? It's also like super viral for everything. They do like tier lists for like baseball players, and but it's always like S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, and then they like Jeff Nippert, who I follow and really like his content, does this a lot. So essentially it's just people go out, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube, and will categorize different exercises as like S tier being the best, F tier being the worst for a specific goal. So it'll be like chest exercises, and they'll go through it and they'll be like dumbbell chest press, like A tier, cable chest flies, S tier, whatever. And it's super trendy, specifically in YouTube. Like these things get tons and tons of views. And Dennis, since you brought it up, I'm curious your take on the trend. I have my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly there's some validity to it, right? And probably the people that are well informed on these things and well researched, and they put these things together, they probably have good explanations, both anecdotally and scientifically, why they categorize certain exercises as such, whether it's S or F or anywhere in the middle. But like, it just, first of all, it becomes obviously like clickbaity, and anything that becomes trendy just becomes nauseating, right? And gets watered down and spoiled by people that are just trying to get clicks. And so you'll come across lists that just have no basis in anything other than the person's opinion and make no sense. But to me though, it just doesn't factor in so many like immeasurable components to this as to what makes one exercise good for one person versus another. Like, yeah, you could look at it from purely the perspective of like, well, this is an exercise that just based on biomechanics is probably going to be better at building your chest than another one. But like, people have different structural limitations, different body types, different levels of coordination, different levels of experience, different degrees of like willingness to push hard on certain exercises versus others for whatever reason. Just they like certain exercises more than others, and they're going to work harder on the ones that they like versus the ones they don't like. So you might give me an S tier exercise, one that is supposed to be superior in terms of accomplishing whatever objective. And maybe I just don't like doing it. And when I do it, I half-ass it and I don't put much effort into it versus the F tier, the one at the bottom of the list that I actually really like doing. And I'm going to work my ass off when I do it. I would take the F tier scenario anytime, right? Like regardless of what people are telling me on YouTube and Instagram that this one is supposed to be more effective. There's just so many variables that are going to affect that these lists just seem like so ridiculous to put together. That's my take.
Do you guys remember when Mark Bell came out a few years ago and was like, we've over-scienced the body? Remember, he very famously kind of, I don't know if he's the first person to say that quote, but it really resonated with me. And like, I think some of this also comes down to like, we've over social media-ized the body. Like,
yeah,
you know, this grading of exercises from S tier to F tier. Like, what does that make somebody feel like if they're doing, like somebody's just out there fucking doing their best and they're like, wow, all my exercises are F tier because this person over here said it's F tier. Like,
who came up with the S?
Here. Go do some push-ups, bro. Like, go like out and go for a walk. All this kind of stuff, sometimes it gets a little bit too, I think, Dennis, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's like, it's most of the time now it's going to be this person's opinion of like what is an S tier versus F tier. Unless you're just doing complete nonsense.
F? Like, is it alphabetical?
F would be fail.
I think
S, lowest grade.
Superior.
S is superior, and then it just goes like A through F after. I didn't understand it at first either. I was like, what the hell? Why is S at the top? What? But then I heard somebody actually say superior.
Yeah, it's superior.
When you guys were in grade school, was the highest level of grade you could earn, was it E or was it A? Could you earn an E? Remember, E was excellent, and then A.
Grade school was E. Grade school was, I remember E. Yeah.
Now
I remember numbers. Yeah, I remember numbers too, mostly.
Yeah. Now they rank you like 1 through 4 of your ability, depending on what system you're in. The whole thing is kind of skewed. There's no more A's, B's, C's. At least not right now. They just got switched over in elementary school that I'm seeing. I don't know. Is that the same for you, Dennis?
Yeah. I mean, my kids are only second grade in kindergarten, so they get like, you know, stars and checks.
Okay. Well, mine finds out what high school she's going to in 3 days, so that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I guess mine gets stickers.
I think these tier list videos it's the perfect example of this meme. And I was trying to see if I could find it, but I was getting too distracted. So I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's this like meme where it's like a graph where it's like down here and then it goes up and then it goes down and it has like the 3 people.
Yeah.
One is like the dummy. Then it's like the guy in the middle who's overcomplicating everything. And then at the end, it's like the sage with the big brain.
Yeah.
And the whole like thing of the meme, and you can apply it to so many things, is that like the dummy and the sage, like you actually get to the same point. But to get to that point, you have to travel through this area where you like make everything so much more complicated. Like the example here would be the dummy is like grow muscle, lift heavy. Then in the middle where you overcomplicate it, it's like the tier list, like what's ideal, what's my ideal rest period, like progressive overload, all these things. And then you get back to the sage and it's back to like grow muscle, lift heavy. Like It's literally just that simple, but you kind of have to go through that journey. And then you figure out that, oh, you know, yes, all those things kind of matter, but it's really just the basics. And the tier list is like the perfect example of that, because I feel like 90% of the people consuming it just aren't doing the basics right. Having said that, in watching those videos, and I know that I'm, maybe not that 90%, I love geeking out on this stuff, and I've taken so much value from the things that I've learned. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. A lot of these videos talk about how you kind of like graduate from getting hypertrophy benefits from just like the barbell lifts, because they limit like how much you can stretch the muscles, because they limit like your actual grip, and the fact that a lot of muscles actually require you to rotate, right? Like to get the full expression of what your chest does, like there should be some wrist rotation. So you can get a lot more out of using a cable machine or a dumbbell. And so a lot of those things have taught me and helped me experiment in the gym with ways, because I have a pretty, longer training age, to now get more bang for my buck when I'm in there by doing less of some of these movements that I've just done for so long. Like I've done flat barbell benching forever. And it definitely got to a point where I wasn't like feeling it as much as I wanted to feel it anymore. So now doing more cable stuff, doing more dumbbell stuff, like exaggerating the stretch, like rotating my wrists on the way up, all those things that I picked up from these little videos, I 100% feel like I'm getting more out of those sessions now. All that being said, you have to earn the training age to get there where any of that stuff makes a difference. If you haven't done just the work with the big compound lifts that have other benefits because of the metabolic stress and all of that good stuff that you get from doing these big compound lifts, you're kind of like majoring in the minor. So that's what I'll say in defense of those videos. I think that they're entertaining, but I've definitely learned a lot from it. But I do think that it's a good example of the whole like, dude, just grow muscle, lift heavy, and you'll get there. Maybe I'll get there someday.
Yeah.
I need to go look at one of these. I have no, I mean, I've never seen any of it come up ever. So
don't bother.
Check it out. But I love what you said about the whole like beginner up around the hill. Some would argue that, I mean, I'd make the claim that I probably fell into that trap for sure through CrossFit, right? Like you really start focusing, and granted, we are trying to win at a sport, so it's a little bit different. But at the end of the day, man, it's just consistency and movement. I think we've almost done a disservice in some ways. I was just talking to someone from Colorado Police Department, and we were discussing how a lot of the guys, they look at fitness as this unattainable thing because it just has been there's so much information out there. And I think that ultimately it's our job to kind of dummy it down and bring down to this position of like consistency, lift heavy, train hard, you're going to be fine. So I appreciate that notion that you were talking about, Gabe, because I feel the same way.
And it's funny. It applies to so many things, man. And it's funny because like I feel like I've been on that journey on so many things. I'm sure I'm going to be on that journey on so many other things. Nutrition is a great example. Like you give me a hard time about this all the time, Jay. Like it's like, hey, just don't eat more like quantity and like, mostly quality. Then like in the middle, it's like, oh, like seed oils, like, what are you eating? Like, all these things. And then at the end, it's like, yeah, just like keep your calories relative to what you're spending and like mostly eat good things. Like you're all good.
Dude, Jordan Syatt put out the best reel. Did you see his reel about the water?
Oh, the tap water one?
Oh my God. It was so good. He's like, he puts out like an influencer on the thing. It's like, don't drink tap water, you're going to die. And he's like, oh, and then he goes, okay, I'm going to drink a bottle of water. And then the lady's like, don't drink bottled water. It has plastic. And he throws it away. Then he brings out like a Topo Chico. He's like, oh, I'm good here. And then and then an influencer says something. Anyways, it's a great meme. You'll have to go watch it. So, all right. Are we talking about?
I still don't know if I'm going to drink tap water though. I'm still out on tap water. I don't think they crossed any, like some of the pipes. You don't think some of the pipes at some point have crossed? Then we got the toilet pipes and then we got the drinking water pipes. We don't think any of those pipes.
I think it just makes your
all the infrastructure of the United States has not been refreshed in how long?
It just makes you stronger.
Working with completely pure pipes.
Dude, I've drank some nasty tap water.
I'm half
nasty.
kidding, but dude, hose water when you were younger that was the truth.
Dude, it's the most refreshing thing ever. Just like gargling the hose water or drinking the water in the shower as a kid. I remember that.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Yeah,
it's the same thing. Your kitchen tap versus your shower tap.
It just feels worse. I don't know. I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know about that. Man, I used to drink the tap water all the time in Mexico because we had the gym down there in Mexico. And I would go to Mexico like 7 times a year, maybe even more. And we had the gym there. And I would drink the tap water every time because I refused to spend the money on the bottled water. Refused. And dude, one time I got so sick. I was like, I'm never drinking the tap water again in Mexico. And since then I haven't. But
I'm pretty sure you're batting 1,000 on going to Mexico and getting sick. Like I think that you're pretty close. You're in the 800s.
I'm in the 800s.
Your Hall of Fame numbers for going to Mexico and getting sick.
Going anywhere and getting sick. Meanwhile, my dad has a stomach of like just he can handle whatever because he grew up in Iran and just anyways. All right, we talking about a curl? Is that what we're doing?
Dan, you're up.
Yeah. All right, so my thought was 95-pound barbell, back against the wall, max reps, just however many you can do. So you can't cheat, flat against the wall the whole time, like butt, shoulders, head. I guess head can come off a little bit. Shoulder blades, tailbone against the wall, straight legs, and just strict curls. Max reps, 95 pounds. That seems reasonable, right?
Straight barbell, 95 pounds?
Sounds heavy.
I guess. I have an easy curl, but I don't know if everyone has one because I don't make it probably.
Easy curl is going to be way easier.
It'll be easier.
Than the straight bar.
Yeah. So straight bar, we'll go straight bar. So it's it's standardized. That's it. Just as many as you can do until you can't do any more.
That sounds heavy.
Yeah, kind of heavy.
It's going to be hard. You're not going to get a ton of reps.
How many reps do you think you can get, Dennis?
I have no idea. When I do barbell curls, I cheat the shit out of them. I don't do them with my back against the wall. So that's gonna be a game changer. I go Arnold style, like full hips involved.
Oh, it's the best.
How close can you get to a wall?
Yeah, how can you do that
standing there with a barbell?
Well, you got to be in like a doorway.
Or the rig. You can do it up against the rig.
It's something. Yeah, or against a squat rack.
Yeah.
You'd have to be up against a squat rack.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sorry. Should have clarified that.
Just be banging holes in the drywall.
Yeah, because it'll be,
I should just do it in the house just for the hell of it.
It has to have openings.
Dude, I don't know, man. I'm actually really intrigued how many I can get. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I might take this. I don't know. No time limit, right? Like, you can just stand there with the bar if you want. Like, eventually, you're just not going to be able to get it up.
I don't think it's going to be that many reps.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I feel like 95 was aggressive, but whatever. All right. Like, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's good. I feel like some of this stuff is harder if it's lighter and you got to go to like see if you can get like 20 or 30. That's brutal.
Yeah,
I'd rather something that like I'm fighting for like 3 or 5.
Yeah, 5 or 6 reps is fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Because the last one was the Gabe was the one that you and I did, right?
The one that we tied exactly.
Oh, the row bench one.
The likelihood of us tying exactly it's insane that's what the result ended up being. Honestly, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm disappointed in myself. Because I should have gotten you on the row by more. And you don't. But dude, yeah, the fact that we tied that was good. I don't know how many other people did it. I've talked to a few guys that have done it, but I didn't know. They didn't share with me their score. But if you didn't do that one, it was a 2K row, right? Into a and then you rested a minute.
Exactly a minute. Yeah. Body weight.
Yeah, and then body weight bench max reps. And I think Gabe and I, we both were in like the 6s or on the like high 6s in the row, and then I got 14, you got 15 on the bench, right?
Yeah, and we were exactly 5 minutes apart, 5 seconds apart on the row. 6:53, 6:58.
Okay, cool. Well, guys, hey, for everybody on the podcast, like we appreciate you guys listening to the episodes, and we have very, very exciting stuff with the updated app. This isn't. I don't like calling it a new app. It's an updated app. It's a better version of what we've been doing for a while. It has the programs that you need. It has a community function. I think it's just going to be amazing. Like a great way to connect like-minded men who want to train hard so they can protect and provide. And then they have videos, really simple videos. We put out the word. We said, hey, what do you guys need from us? How can we serve you better? And it was more workout options. It was videos so we can know what we're doing, connecting with like-minded people, and nutrition advice. And we nailed each one of those on the updated app. So make sure to check out the podcast show notes for more information on that. Super excited for that improvement. And I think it's really going to impact a lot of guys, a lot of people in general. So I'm fired up about it. Glad to have you guys as a part of it. And any kind of closing remarks? Otherwise, we're going to close this thing out. We're going to get ready to rock and roll for the rest of the day. Okay, I see some fist up. We're ready to rock and roll.
Don't tear a bicep.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
don't put
Don't tear it.
Really, Dennis. Really, Dennis.
Come on, bro.
On that note, appreciate you. Appreciate your families. Go check out
Maybe
all the
go a little
episodes of the
lighter than
podcast.
95.
And Dennis is no longer allowed on the show. Talk to you guys later.